All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today we are going to distill the core philosophy behind the best-selling book, 12 Rules for Life. We're going to cut right through all the noise and get to the fundamental ideas that make this thing tick, using the source material itself as our map. So the whole idea here is that you can pretty much understand all of human experience through the lens of two massive fundamental forces: order and chaos. Order, that's the world you know. It's your house, your family, your job, it's security, tradition, where everything behaves the way you expect. Chaos, well, that's everything else. It's the unknown. It's where all the possibility and freedom is, but it's also where fear and uncertainty live.
And this isn't just some clever metaphor, right? The idea here is that this is the actual meta-reality we are biologically and psychologically wired for. We're always walking that line between the two, trying to stay stable while at the same time pushing out into new territory. Our entire lives are played out on this stage.
Okay, let's get into it. And this starts with a pretty tough pill to swallow. The idea presented in the source is that life itself is an unfair game. It's just filled with suffering. And that's before we even do anything to mess it up ourselves. The world just starts out as a place of inequality and tragedy.
So, to get this point across, the book points to a pretty unexpected creature, the lobster. And this is to show a concept that is ancient, the dominance hierarchy. This isn't some newfangled human invention. Nope. We're talking about a 350 million-year-old system for sorting out who gets what, based on status and territory. It's a system we've inherited.
Now here's where it gets really wild. This whole hierarchy, it's not just about who's the strongest, it's literally brain chemistry. A lobster's posture, its confidence, whether it struts around or hides in a corner, that's all dictated by its serotonin levels. And the crazy parallel to us is that the very same antidepressants that work on humans can take a defeated, slouchy lobster and make it confident again.
Okay, so this whole idea of inequality, it's not just for lobsters in the deep sea. It shows up in human creativity too. It's a principle known as Price's Law, and it basically says that the square root of the number of people in any creative field will produce half of the valuable output. This applies to, well, everything, from how wealth is distributed to book sales to the classical music we still listen to. Just think about classical music for a second. This chart really shows it all. You've got a tiny handful of composers, Bach, Mozart, Beethoven, you know the names, and they completely dominate the entire repertoire. Meanwhile, the music of thousands of other composers is almost never heard. It's a pattern that pops up everywhere, suggesting inequality isn't a flaw in the system, it's a fundamental feature of the world.
And this all leads to a principle that the book calls maybe the harshest statement ever attributed to Christ. It's called the Matthew Principle. It points to this brutal reality that advantage just seems to attract more advantage, while disadvantage does the same, but in reverse. It's a feedback loop that can send people spiraling up or spiraling way, way down.
Okay, so if life is already this tough, unfair game, how on earth do we as humans manage to make it even worse? I mean, natural disasters are one thing, but the evil that people do to each other, that's a whole other category of suffering.
Well, the answer given is our unique and frankly terrifying capacity for self-conscious deception. We're the only creatures who truly understand how fragile and vulnerable we are. And because we know that, we also know exactly how to hurt each other in the most targeted, painful ways imaginable. And we do it to ourselves, too.
And this leads down a really predictable and really destructive path. It all starts when you feel like someone's wronged you, but you don't say anything. You let that feeling fester in silence. That silence brews bitterness, which eventually sours into these dark fantasies of revenge. And if you let it go far enough, you can end up deciding that the whole world, that being itself, is corrupt and deserves to be destroyed.
So this brings us to what the book calls life lies. Think of these as the bogus stories we tell ourselves and other people to either justify our failures or to try and manipulate the world into giving us what we think we want. It's like aiming your life at a picture on a travel poster instead of a real destination. These fake goals just corrupt everything we do.
And here's the kicker. These little personal lies, they don't just mess you up.
The source makes a huge point of this. When you act out a lie, you know you're doing it. In that moment, your conscience tells you it's wrong. And those little conscious acts of deceit, they add up. They corrupt your character, and the philosophy argues they literally feed the very systems of tyranny and decay in our society. All right, so that's the problem. Life is hard, and we make it worse with lies. So what's the solution? How do we build from here? Well, the antidote, according to this philosophy, is to voluntarily turn around and face all that chaos head-on, armed with truth and responsibility.
But that's a huge question, right? When your life feels like it's in a million pieces, where do you even start? It's totally overwhelming. But the path forward, as it's laid out here, doesn't start with some grand world-saving gesture. It starts with something much smaller, much more personal.
It starts with this. A really simple but incredibly powerful idea. Start to stop doing what you know to be wrong. You might not know the right thing to do, but almost everybody knows some things they're doing that their own conscience is screaming at them to stop. The very first step is to just stop. And the advice for how to do that is just so practical. If you have a task that feels way too big, just make it smaller. Still too big? Make it smaller again. You shrink it down until it's so tiny, so manageable, that you'd be embarrassed not to do it. And that right there, that's your first win against the chaos. And once you take that first step, you start to build. And the main tool you use, words. The idea is that your most powerful weapon is precise, truthful speech. When you carefully articulate what you actually believe, when you speak honestly, or at the very least stop telling lies, you start to transform that terrifying, unknown chaos into a place you can actually live. Now, this next point is a really tough one to swallow. To be a genuinely good person, you have to first get in touch with your own capacity for evil. I know, it sounds crazy, but the idea is that by understanding that you too could be a monster, you integrate that darkness. And that integration gives you the real strength and self-respect you need to stand up to evil in the world without getting bitter yourself. Okay, so this brings us to the final and maybe most important piece of the puzzle. Why? Why go through all this trouble? Why face the dragons of life? What is the ultimate payoff here? The destination isn't happiness or comfort. It's meaning. And what is meaning? It's that feeling you get when you are right on the razor's edge between order and chaos. You're stable, you're secure, but you're also growing, you're exploring. You've got one foot in what you know and one foot stepping out into the unknown. That sweet spot, that's where meaning is found. And by chasing that meaning, by building your character and voluntarily taking on all this responsibility, the claim is that we can become so much more resilient than we can possibly imagine. We can handle the tragedy of life without letting it break us or turn us into something hateful and destructive. So at the end of the day, that's the whole point. This journey isn't about being happy all the time. That's just not realistic. It's about finding a meaning so deep, so profound, that it can carry you through the absolute worst that life can throw at you. And that is the ultimate antidote to chaos and suffering. So we'll just leave you with this final question, turning this from just an explainer into a bit of a personal challenge for you. What is the one small, difficult thing you could do today to bring a little more order to your own life? Because if this philosophy is right, the way out of the chaos starts with that one single, voluntary step.